we had just finished talking about Lincoln, and before the war was over, they knew eventually the South would lose, and he was being very proactive in designing government agencies to meet the needs when the war finally ended of the freedmen, the free ex-slaves. And so some of their major goals and what their purpose was to help them, to help provide for them. And in the last video we talked about an essential part of a good citizenry is a literate citizenry. A citizenry that can read, that can write, that can communicate, that can conduct business, and that can articulate their ideas, examine the ideas of other people, and use those when voting and making decisions. So in order to have a government run well, you have to have a well-educated population. This is a picture of some of the schools that this agency began to set up throughout the South to teach not only freedmen, but poor whites how to read and write. And there were a lot of Northerners who came down to participate and teach. So this is set up, it was established in February. Here we are in April. And the war is over, and Lincoln is thinking, oh, it's over. And now I need to catch my breath again, because we have a huge job to reunite the country. And it's just these few days go by. Now understand, the South was not very pleased they lost. There was a lot of anger, a lot of resentment, a lot of hatred, much hatred towards Lincoln. And so he was at a theater, he was seeing a performance, and a very famous actor at the time, John Wilkes Booth, came up behind Lincoln as he was sitting in the presidential box and shot him in the head. He died. He lived through the night, and then he died the next morning. And now here's the big question. How are we going to lead Reconstruction? What path is Reconstruction going to take? Lincoln wanted to be a moderate. Remember, he only wanted 10%. Now that Lincoln's gone, you have the Southern, the freedmen who love it, who are thrilled, but now that he is gone, well, how is this going to work? And it just, for some of the Southerners, it was heaven. The evil man is gone. For some of the Northern abolitionists and the more moderates, they were devastated. And so here is a drawing of the assassination of Lincoln. So, the more radical Republicans began to take over, as I mentioned in the other videos. And so they were seeing that the freedmen, the freed black slaves, were not being treated well by a lot of their ex-masters. And so they decided, we need to pass some laws to ensure that we take care of these freedmen. And it was the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And this is where the idea of ensuring the rights, remember that was the issue in the Constitution, based on freedom. And freedom is because everybody has the equal individual rights given to them by God. So the Civil Rights Act of 1866 gave African Americans citizenship. They are now not just property. Remember the Supreme Court and the Dred Scott decision, they are nothing but property. You move them around as you would move anything. But now, their new status, they are established as citizens. And it gave African Americans citizenship, all the rights that go with citizenship, habeas corpus, the right to vote, etc., etc. And it forbid any state from passing laws that would discriminate or restrict those rights being applied to African Americans now. And you have to understand that this is just 1 year since the war ended. A lot of Southerners are like, don't tell me in this year that this person goes from my property to having equal rights with me. And that was a mental crazy maker. And so many Southerners really were angry at this. This is a picture of former slaves, wounded veterans from the North, celebrating when they heard about the Civil Rights passage. Now, it's very interesting, though. This passage was intended to deal with the African American slaves, but the act declared that all persons born in the U.S. were now citizens without regard to race, color, or previous condition of servitude, excluding Native Americans. So we still are saying, oh, there's another human being that's not quite at the same place. Very interesting that they fought such a horrific war and still couldn't apply it to all. In order to ensure that there would be a permanent change in the law, that we could never go back to allowing slavery, any of that the African American, the freedmen, were now going to be given and appropriate all their rights as citizens, the 14th Amendment was passed. And it guarantees specifically citizenship to African Americans. The radical Republicans in Congress and the moderate Republicans were determined to ensure in the Constitution that it could never be changed. Well, it could be changed, but to change with an amendment is pretty difficult. But to ensure that African Americans now are considered citizens. You are now a citizen with all the rights of the citizens. So, 13th Amendment was banning on slavery. 14th Amendment was guaranteed the rights of citizens. Then we get to the election of 1866. And this leads us down a whole nother path of what this country was struggling to reconcile. The South and the North. And when you think about it, think about arguments or fights you may have with siblings or friends, and how difficult it is a lot of times in a marriage to reconcile those two parties. And these are just a few people involved. And now, how are we going to reconcile millions? And we will continue to look at that with the election in 1866 on the next video.